Welcome to episode 103 of the Necronama.com. I am James Sabata, horror author, screenwriter, co-host of the podcast you're listening to right now, and I don't know what I did yesterday, let alone 28 days ago.
And I am Don Guillory, author, historian, educator, co-host of this podcast. And I was so scared, man. I kept waiting for Sandra Bullock to appear, but she never did.
Our guest today, Red Lagoe, is here. I'm super excited to have you here, Red.
Welcome.
Thank you. I am very excited to be here. I write horror, obviously. I was a staff writer for Crystal Lake Publishing's Stillwater Bay series. I wrote a few episodes for that. And I've had stories published in Crystal Lake Publishing's Shallow Waters, also with Sinister Smile Press and Darkmoon Digest and several other anthologies. My horror collection, Lucid Screams, came out last year, and I have another horror collection, Dismal Dreams, that will be coming out in June.
Awesome. So when you do a collection, I haven't had the joy of reading it yet, but do you set out with an overall theme, or do you kind of take different stories and go, hey, these would work well together? What is your thought process to making a collection?
My process is I just take the stories that have been published and that I have regained my rights to, that are no longer under contract.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
I take all those and maybe write some new ones, and I make them work together.
Nice.
I haven't done an overall themed one yet because none of them really go well together, but if I arrange them just right in a certain order, they tend to have a nice flow to them.
I always feel like a total jerk with that kind of stuff because I read the same way that I'll listen to a full CD. I randomly skip around. And I'm like, I know somebody poured their heart and soul into getting this in the perfect order to make it all work together. And then I came along and I was like, track 3, track 7,
Yeah.
So
I do the same thing. I do the same thing with reading too. I spend a lot of time focusing on what order they'll go in. I spent a couple days working on the order of the stories, getting it just right. But when I sit down and read a collection or an anthology, I bounce around.
I think that's pretty typical. Don, what do you do?
I'm guilty of the same. In fact, I feel as though the books that advertise themselves as, hey, you don't have to start at any chapter, and none of these chapters flow together, so you can do any story. I take that as a challenge. I'm like, no, that's how I like to read other books. So you know what, damn it, I'm going to read you in order. Ha ha. Nice try.
I even do it with TV shows like Black Mirror, where it doesn't matter. I just go wherever. I don't care. Everyone's like, oh, you started the new season. What'd you think of episode 1? And I'm like, oh yeah, I haven't watched that one yet. So I always think, I look at my own short stories and none of them have anything to do with each other. So I'm always like, should I even put this in a collection? It seems weird. It's just this hodgepodge of stuff I'd throw together. So it makes me feel better that you said that's kind of how it is. And then you just make it work. And I'll be honest, I never even considered, hey, I could write a couple new ones that tie them together. This is how I miss the totally obvious pieces of things, right? So speaking of short stories, I know you already know how much I love this story, but I also want to throw out that you have a great short story in the We Are Wolves anthology. I'm a huge fan of that anthology. It's all women, and proceeds went to domestic violence shelters and such, and I just think that's so great. So everyone should check that out too, and definitely read Dollhouse.
Oh, thank you. Sometimes I say I had a lot of fun writing stories, but that one, I don't know. It wasn't a fun one to write. But I did enjoy writing it in some twisted way.
I love everything about it. It fits so many themes and so so many levels of trauma, shall we say, without giving too much away, into such a very short space. And I think that's why it resonates with me so well. But yeah, I just wanted to make sure people get that one too with the others you listed. So
thank you. Yeah, there's a lot of great authors in that anthology.
that whole book is so good. Yeah.
Stories. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about the film we're here for. 28 Days Later. The later is the important part, Don. That's how you get away from Sandra Bullock. Wouldn't that be a film? Sandra Bullock's chasing you for 28 days. Ooh. Anyway, just trying to hit you with the Razzie. So it's my favorite Razzie story ever. I love her for that. Yeah, so you picked 28 Days Later. Would you like to tell us why that's the one you picked?
I picked it because actually when I heard of 28 Days Later, I did think Sandra Bullock. Because they came out around the same time.
They did. It's weird. Yeah.
Or maybe 28 Days came out a couple years before. I don't remember. But I remember that was my first thought when my husband suggested watching it. I was like, what? That's not horror. But I grew up on 80s horror, like slasher flicks. And I was a kid in the 80s, so my brothers would rent horror movies that I was not old enough to watch, but to watch them anyway. So I grew up on Dawn of the Dead and Return of the Living Dead and I don't know if you remember Return of the Living Dead Part 2. It was so cheesy. It's a terrible, terrible 80s movie. But I was like 10 or 11. I watched it over and over again. I love that zombie movie. And then there wasn't anything zombie related for years. And then my husband was like, yeah, let's watch this new zombie movie that came out. And so I think we rented it on DVD, and they could run, and and this was the movie that's like spawned all of our apocalypse plans. Like, okay, if there's an apocalypse, well, where do we go? If there's zombies, where do we go? What do we do?
Right.
Like all of our plans started after watching that movie, and it was like right after 9/11 too, and so the whole idea of civilization kind of crumbling. Didn't seem all that far-fetched at the time.
Oh, no, not at all.
And that maybe sounds dramatic.
No, it doesn't.
At the time, it felt that way. And then after that, it was Dawn of the Dead, and it was Shaun of the Dead. And so 28 Days Later was it reanimated the zombie craze.
It brought it back to life.
Yes.
I like that. That's nice.
No, I'm glad that you brought that up as far as, this is post 9/11, because that mindset, a lot of people, and I'm not going to say a lot of people who are listening, but there are a lot of people that seem to forget historic events that surround movie releases or precede movie releases. And it changed your perspective on how a movie is going to hit an audience. Like, that previous summer, what was that movie? Swordfish had come out, right? So it deals with terrorists, these guys who are going around creating terrorist actions around towards civilian populaces, and it wasn't really thought of as it wasn't thought of in a certain light when it came out during that summer, but in the fall when it came out on DVD and VHS was, I think, still around. It had to have warning stickers on it to let people know, like, hey, you might still be traumatized by 9/11. This film has scenes of terrorism. And it was a trigger warning before people were associated or understood what a trigger warning was. But yeah, that opening scene in this film, or I shouldn't say the opening scene, but the moment where Jim leaves the hospital, that's what New York looked like for days.
Yes.
There was nobody around. So I'm glad that you brought that up, because I had completely forgotten about that, because it's going to be it's going to be 20 years this fall. As opposed to, this was just 1 year after when this film was released. And, we're so far removed from it now. It's kind of like somebody says, never forget. And you're like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
As opposed to when you're that close to the incident. Yeah, damn right. You're not going to forget. I remember how it was that day, 9 months later, a year later, 5 years later. And now 20 years later, I'm kind of like, I really don't remember that much about how I remember what happened. I remember where I was, but I can't remember like that despair and all the paranoia and things that were going on, and the endless loop of just despair and fright that was being pushed on through things like Fox News and CNN and whatever the mass media was.
Mm-hmm. I remember the first time I watched the movie. It wasn't immediately after it came out. It was already on DVD in the U.S., so it was probably 2003 or 2004, I'm guessing. But I remember watching that movie, and Jim's walking around the city, and he's looking at all the little notes on the wall of missing people. And I'm like, they did that in New York. Like that, that kind of hit hard. And it's funny. It was written prior to 9/11.
Well, I was actually reading today that they were filming during 9/11, and they filmed like the happiest scene in the whole movie when they're having it's basically a celebratory dinner, and when they're eating and they're happy for that little tiny moment with Frank,
right?
And that's the scene they happened to film on 9/11, and they were talking about how horrible it was. Well, maybe it was actually the 12th there. Anyway, whatever it was following 9/11 happening. And it was that same space. And they just felt so weird filming the happiest movie piece the day that happened. And I thought, that's so crazy. Like, we all remember where we were, And, anybody alive for it, obviously. But, it's so ingrained in us that we remember this moment so clearly. And then you have what they were doing and all the context associated with it. Like you said, like there's part of me that wonders, like, were those notes in the original script or did they add it from that? Maybe it was, maybe it absolutely was. It's a logical thing to do. But, there's little things like that I'm like, what did you see on TV that you were able to put into this to add even more context and fear?
Yeah.
But yeah, I wasn't even planning on talking about 9/11.
Yeah,
I was like, wow, where am I going to fit that in? And you guys just handed it to me.
My brain's like spiraling on this tangent of 9/11 now, thinking of different scenes in the story. Like there's a moment after, I'm just going to bounce around. There's a moment after Jim escaped. No, he didn't escape the compound. He was being detained by the bad guys, and like they were taking him off to kill him. There's a moment where he like falls down and he looks up at the sky and he sees a plane.
Yeah.
And that's a big moment of hope in the movie. Like there's a hope that it's not worldwide, that there's a hope for a future because he sees this plane. And I don't know what it was like in the rest of the country, but I was in upstate New York, farm country.
Oh man.
And I mean, our skies were just blue. There were no jet trails anywhere at all, like for weeks. Like there were no planes in the sky. And that was very weird, even in farm country. And I don't know, I wonder if that symbol was put in after the fact. Because, I mean, flights were just shut down for the longest time, and there were no planes in the sky. And that plane kind of symbolizes hope or a future. Or, seeing those jet trails in the sky is like some kind of sign of a better time coming or a return to normalcy.
That's such a cool juxtaposition. Like, I mean, it probably wasn't purposeful, but it's so cool how that plays into the time. I also, my other, like, real 9/11 question is, the ending was changed. The original ending, it's actually available on a lot of the DVDs and different stuff like that. But the original ending, Jim dies, and the other two go on without him. And when they showed it to test audiences thought it was way too bleak and there was no hope. And I wonder how much that feeling after 9/11 played into that reaction. Like, if this had come out 2 years sooner, is everybody like, oh, wow, that's a great ending? I don't know.
Well, if you look at
it might have been
something
too
like, well, I mean, if you look at an ending like Train to Busan, right? Yeah. Sorry, everybody, you haven't seen it by now. It has a bittersweet ending, right? So it's kind of the same thing that two women, or really three, survive, while the dad of the little girl doesn't make it. because he succumbs to being bitten and everything. But I think it all depends on how it would have been shot. Like if it had been shot like that, but then again, time might have played into it as well. But if it had been shot in the same fashion as those final scenes of Train to Busan, I think as far as Jim dies or Jim is killed or he becomes an infected or something, and the little girl and Hannah and Selena actually survive and make it to safety. I mean, there's a way you could write that in or have that work out. But yeah, it comes down to maybe it is timing with that, depending on how his death was represented in the film.
Yeah, I mean, it's a cool ending. I watched it today, and basically they get him to the hospital, and Selena's trying to save him, and she's unable to do so. And then the two of them still in their dresses that they had. Hannah's like, what do we do now? And Selena says, we live. And they grab their guns and they go out the door. And it's a cool exit. To me, it's a way better ending. I liked it so much more. But I have issues with the real ending that we'll get to later. But for me, this was just so much more powerful. And it was just our story here is about Jim. We start in the hospital, we end in the hospital, and life goes on even when he doesn't. And I thought that was such a powerful ending. But again, I can totally see why at the time that it would have been with test audiences, why this hit too hard and why it was too bleak and why they were like, no, that's not what we need right now. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a possibility. I liked, I was quite happy with the ending that made the cut. But I tend to like a little hope at the end of my horror stories. Not always. Sometimes I just like people to die. But but I do like a little hope. I'm a bit of an optimist. But the other one, I just watched the other one today also. And I agree. I like it. I like the message there. And that one, it felt a lot more like Jim was like a martyr of some sort. Like his whole purpose was to get these women out of the situation, and then they get to carry on. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that as an ending. I like it, but I think it needed more. I'm not sure what that more is.
Here's my only real complaint with the actual ending. It's the word hello. Put help.
Yeah, exactly.
You could have written it faster. It implies some kind of, hey, we fucking need help, as opposed to stop by when you have time and we'll have a cup of tea. Like, no, like we're trying to get out of here. Why are you writing hello?
Maybe they don't feel like they need help.
I suppose they want out. Like, even if you didn't feel like you need help, like, isn't that going to get your reaction faster? And it also on a personal level, it bugged me so much that Jim walks around the entire movie yelling hello. So by the time it got to this, I was like, fuck you, not again. No more hellos.
It should have been an infected person flying the plane. That would have been the trigger to get somebody infected.
You see his rage. Just Alicia's missiles.
Well, Red, you brought up the whole thing of I guess a happy ending or optimistic ending or anything like that. But one thing I kept looking for in this film, because I don't think I've seen this film probably since it came out. And when I watched it the other day, I was thinking, well, all right, cool. It's been all this time. You've got HD, you got 4K, now you have 8K. You got all these different ways that films are shot, or ways that film has been shot since this movie came out, or since this movie was filmed. And when I was watching, I was like, oh, damn, this is really gritty. The remastering of this didn't go so well. It's very gritty. And then it gets to the end. I was like, son of a bitch. They got me the entire time, because everything up until they're safe is shot in a resolution that gives you that gritty, grimy, uncomfortable feeling. And then when they get to the end, it's so clear. I mean, and especially because there's more color that's offered. It's much brighter, but the clarity and the resolution is a lot higher than what you have for 95% of the film. And when I saw that, I looked at my wife, was like, they got me. She's like, what? It was like, this whole time I was sitting here, like, I was bothered by the way that the resolution came through on the TV. And what it was the way it was shot. And in my estimation, that was a brilliant thing because you're so unsettled because so many things aren't clear in the film. And so many things are a little bit distorted or hard to make out. But at the end, everything's clear, everything's bright, and it's not as unsettling anymore, other than making these sheets that say hello.
I agree. Well, he shot it all digital, which I think was a fairly new thing to do back then. I'm not. There's my dogs. I'm not super familiar with the way films are shot, but I felt the same way. The whole thing is very fast and gritty, and almost the scenes are almost a little disjointed, and then make you really uncomfortable. And then you get to the end, and everything's clear and hopeful and bright. And I like the way that they pulled that off. And yeah, I think it was definitely on purpose. There's a lot of really great scenes throughout the whole thing. Different details that are in the film that are very artistic. They use like statue. There's a statue in the mansion, and I read an article about it. I'm not going to pretend I'm smart or anything, but I read an article about it. It's a statue of Laocoon. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing it Laocoon. It's Laocoon, and it's like the icon of human agony is what I read about. And so there's a lot of little details like that throughout the film that I think are really artistic. Danny Boyle, I think, did a good job of that.
I had no idea about that. That's really cool.
Did.
I'm gonna go read about that later. Yeah. My only thing, like, I get that it was an artistic choice to do the gritty, and it works. It does. But it's also the kind of thing that if I didn't know it going in, I would have given up like 20 minutes in. I would have been like, this story isn't moving fast enough for me, and it's annoying to look at, and I would have bolted. So for me, I think when it came out, it probably did better. Like, I would have done better with it when it came out than I do with it today because of the level of video I'm used to watching. Does that make sense?
Okay.
That makes perfect sense, because when we watched it on a tube TV. You know, so the resolution wasn't great anyway.
Yeah, no, and that makes total sense, you know, but I'm so used to the like crystal clear, you know, 20 years from now I'm going to be like, "Oh, we were watching such blurry shit." But today what's considered crystal clear, and so I'm like trying to watch this, and it was literally bugging me. I was just like, I know this film well enough to know that it's on purpose, but God, I'm not in the mood for this right now.
Right.
And then I had this moment. I had completely forgotten like the whole second half of this film. And I feel like maybe I watched the beginning a lot with like different friends or stuff, and then I just like, you know, did other stuff or I left or whatever. And so the second half wasn't nearly as well known to me, and I'd completely forgotten Christopher Eccleston was in it. And I'm watching this, and there's all this London stuff and all this creepy stuff happening. And I was texting one of my friends who was watching it as well, and I was like, "This feels like a weird Doctor Who episode." And literally, like a minute later, I'm like, "Well, shit, Doctor Who just showed up." So yeah. But man, once the soldiers get there, that's where I really dove into this. Up until then, like I get that at the time, you know, we weren't getting a lot of, not that these are even zombies, but we weren't getting a lot of this zombie genre feel at that point. But now it's so played out that the first half I was just like, oh my God, can we do anything new here? Like, can we, like, new to me this moment, which doesn't make sense, but that's how I bitch about stuff. And then when the soldier story arrived, I was so 100% into this. It was like I was suddenly watching something completely different. But Red, I know you really want to talk about one aspect with the soldiers.
Oh,
so
that's I don't mind if you jump on it, but it's not something I really thought about when I watched it years ago. So the whole scene where the soldiers have put out the call for people to come to them, and Jim finds out the reason they put out the call for people to come is because they wanted women, because women meant the future. So they basically wanted sex slaves, in a way, because they weren't gonna ask politely. and it's something I thought about before, but I focused more on Jim's reaction to it and how Jim kind of, this is a completely different topic for discussion, but how Jim kind of, had this rage within that he released just to save the ones that he loved, for the people he now considered his family. But what I hadn't considered before was how quickly society seemed to revert back to the olden days of where women were just property. And I think it was handled pretty well in this story. Our culture's come a long way. Daughters used to be sold like property.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of tiny steps along the way, and there's a lot of times where we feel like, okay, we're equals now, which of course isn't always the case in our society.
Yeah.
I like that they tackle this this aspect by showing that, a very realistic look at what could happen if civilization as we knew it, if the laws that protect women were suddenly not enforced anymore. What would a lot of men do? Of course, not all of them.
If it's one or more, that's already too many.
Yeah.
It doesn't even have to be because there are guys, and I'm gonna focus in on men. There are men that don't even regard the laws as something, because I think April is Sexual Assault Month, if I'm not mistaken, and April 14th is noted as Denim Day because a judge in Italy, and not just him, but there are judges who've done this in other places that went straight to blaming the victim of sexual assault for being assaulted because of what they were wearing. And the judge in this one case stated like, oh, well, it's because you were wearing those tight blue jeans. That's why he couldn't resist. And so there are advocates and activists that organized to make April 14th the day to recognize, call it Denim Day, but to recognize that, what you're wearing is not an excuse for someone to sexually assault you.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of guys, and I have no problem calling them pieces of shit. But there are a lot of guys who think that, whatever a woman wears or whatever the situation that she finds herself in, it's perfectly okay, which is also what we saw these soldiers doing. They were like, no, like, you're here. That's what you're here for. You're ours now. I'm going to take the black one. You take the young one. We're going to have our turns. And just the level of just discomfort at that, as a male, because I can't speak from the perspective of a woman and what you would feel that, but just the disgust and discomfort in seeing that these men are coming together with this argument, and none of them are standing up, other than Jim. None of them are standing up and saying like, this is wrong.
Yeah.
Actually, I take that back. One person, one of them did say it was wrong, and he ended up getting killed. But just the idea that it was only that one sergeant who was saying it, and they immediately kill him, but no one else comes forward and says like, "Hey, this is wrong. We shouldn't be doing this."
Yeah, it was really disturbing, because how many other people today, and maybe they won't act on those feelings that they have. Are they only not acting on those feelings because it's the law, because they could get in trouble? What happens if they don't get in trouble anymore? What happens when you take away that fear of consequences? Are they going to resort to just being dirtbags and claiming what's theirs?
My answer to that, and I would like to preface this with, these opinions belong to James Sabata. Yeah, I look at well, hell, I'll just be a dick here.
Do
I
it.
look at police, and police have so few accountabilities these days. And we end up with countless cases, whether it's murder, whether it's rape, whether it's taking property and doing whatever with it. Like there's no accountability. And once you feel like you're above the law, that's how you're going to act. Mm-hmm. And I feel like certain professions, whether it's police or just authority positions in general, you gain more power as you move up, right? So like if you're the CEO, you can get away with more stuff than the guy in the mailroom. And certain professions seem to pull that type of person anyway, and then take away accountability, and it just grows and gets worse. And so when you say, what happens if there's no accountability? I think that we see it daily, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. And it's not even just jobs. It's not any of that. It's a white guy can go shoot up an office building and kill 20 people and go get a Happy Meal with the police, while a black guy can get shot in his own apartment when somebody shouldn't have been there anyway. And again, this is me. This is my jadedness. But like, it feels like when we're constantly shown that certain people, under whatever condition, will not be held accountable in the same way, those people just keep meeting that line of, well, I didn't go this far, so no one will touch me.
It's a terrifying thing, because we know there are good cops. I know good cops, but they're not the ones that make it up the ladder. They're not the ones that make it into those important positions sometimes. And it's the dirtbags that tend to climb the ladder and have the power.
Yeah.
Which is a scary thing, which is what happens in this movie. You know, the people with the power, the people with the guns and the training, and they ended up being the dirtbags.
We see that a lot in any zombie genre type film. You know, there's always, almost every one of these films has a human that's worse than the threat. You know, they're a way bigger threat than the monster. And like The Walking Dead, when the governor hits, right? Like, he's such a great villain, in my opinion, at least in the comics. He's pretty good in the TV show, but in the comics, he's fantastic. And it's always this type of thing. It's, this person has power. Everybody else feels like, you know, I don't want the governor to kick me out of this town. So I'll do whatever I have to do to appease him, right? And so they look the other way. And it's that looking the other way and protecting yourself that I think really, truly feeds into this entire accountability thing that we're talking about, no matter which aspect we're looking at. But I think that zombie movies hit this on another level than most horror does, because they always show that, like Scooby-Doo taught us, the real monsters are human.
Yeah. Yes.
We've seen this before in at least American society. We've seen this before where, you know, when with the system of enslavement, there were men who were making the argument that they were justified in doing it. And for those of you who don't believe me, there's plenty of resources been on this. In fact, there are volumes of historiography that talk about it. One of which would be, you know, Peggy Pasco's "What Comes Naturally." You have war itself, because I think because I'd watched Platoon a couple of days prior to watching 28 Days Later, there's one scene that sticks out to me, and it's the scene where they go to a Vietnamese village, obviously because they're in Vietnam, but they go to a village in Vietnam, and these guys just decide, oh, there are some girls here, and they pull these girls, some adult women and then some children, and proceed to sexually assault and rape them. And that was what was in my mind as far as, I don't want this movie to go there, because we've already had movies that have gone there. And the response that these guys gave was, when they get caught by this other soldier who disagrees with what they're doing and stops them from raping these children. And they're like, what the hell's wrong with you, man? Are you some kind of homo? Do you not like girls? And, you know, he doesn't even respond to that. He's like, they're human beings, they're children, and they still can't. It still can't compute to these guys who are committing rape, like that they shouldn't be doing it, and they turn on this guy for disapproving of them raping women and children. And I think that's what stood out to me during this scene, or at least not during the scene, but this conversation that repeats over and over again, where these guys are trying to justify, being able to have access to Selena and Hannah's bodies, or any woman that they come across. Like, they happen to be the ones that are going to lead this new society, so it's their responsibility. And for them, it's weird because it almost seems like they're arguing that it's not really rape. This is for society. This is for civilization. We've got to fix it. So in order for us to fix it, we got to do X, Y, and Z, and get these women to have babies by us, whether it's by choice or by force.
Ooh, I think that is spot on. One of the this is a little off the topic, but my mind went down. My mind went down a little tangent road. It tends to do that sometimes. I started thinking about the general and how he said it's people killing people. There's a conversation at the base where the one guy, the sergeant, and this was the guy that actually stood up to the other soldiers. He said something along the lines of, if you look at the entire span of existence, human beings have only been here for like a blink of the eye. So infection wipes out all people. That's the return to normalcy. In that scene, I'm thinking this guy is screwed up, but he ends up being the the sane one who tries to stop these guys. And then the general says something along the lines of, "You want to know what's normal is people killing people. For as long as I can remember, there's been wars and everything I've ever seen, it's just been people killing people." And
it's crazy because they're both right.
Yeah. It's just history just repeating itself over and over again. And while it seems like we're making progress, the steps sometimes just feel too small.
I think one of the biggest problems is that when we make progress, we also make better weapons and better ways to annihilate ourselves.
Yeah.
So they kind of go hand in hand. We're like a constant pendulum of trying to make life better and trying to absolutely end life. It's so weird. I want to go back to the conversation about the soldiers one last time, real fast. I can't help but notice, and maybe this is totally obvious, but I've just never put it in these words to myself before. I can't help but notice that people only get mad when people on their level call them out. So, if the people that the guys in Platoon are raping were yelling, "You're a rapist," then they wouldn't care. But when somebody on their level says it to them, then it's like, whoa, wait, what? What did you say to me? And I don't know if that's an accountability factor of shit, I hope this guy doesn't get me in trouble, or if it's that you value their opinion more in normal daily life before this, and so it hits harder. I don't know. What do either of you think about that? Am I even making sense?
I think that makes sense. I think it probably depends on the person.
Right.
I think some people are, maybe they haven't raped yet, but maybe some people would be the rapist type, but to call them out for their actions, they feel offended because they don't see themselves as that way. And then there are other people who maybe it is the fear of getting in trouble. I think it all depends on the asshole you're talking to.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. Don, do you have anything to add to that?
I think it also comes down to this idea of you're choosing them over us. And the idea of you're breaking from us. This is this understanding of this community, culture, whatever that we've created here, and you're standing against us. So, you're now making yourself an other as opposed to part of this group. Whether under other circumstances, under normal circumstances, yeah, this would be rape. But hey, this is war, and this is the shit that happens. or whatever excuse that these guys would try and give themselves, or it's the end of the world. We've got to save humanity, with this altruistic or ridiculous perspective. But by that moment when you don't agree with the way that they're going with whatever direction that they're going in, you now become the other, and you become a threat. Essentially, you become a threat to their existence, or a potential threat to their continued survival.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
All right, I got to talk about Selena. One, because I love Naomi Harris, and I loved her hair in this movie. Because my first thought was like, how is her hair so fucking perfect through this entire movie? Like, she has that cool punk rock perm thing going on. Anyway, but the philosophy, or at least this early on in the film, when Jim, he doesn't escape the hospital, he just leaves the hospital, and I didn't think about this, but I was looking at some of the factual stuff about Jim would actually have been dead, because it didn't explain how everyone else had apparently abandoned the hospital, or infected rage monsters had gotten into the hospital or anything like that. Because apparently there's a clip early on where they do overrun the hospital, but he becomes spared. But then in addition to that, he's still on an IV when he does wake up from his coma. Which again, it was one of the, it was some medical professional pointing out that he would be dead. He would be dehydrated because there was no food that was hooked up to him. He had that one IV bag that was halfway, the IV bag would have been done in hours, not 28 days. So anyway, aside from that.
Well, plus wouldn't they attack him in the bed?
They locked the door.
That's what I don't...
Huh. I like it.
It also could have been he wasn't making noise.
From underneath. They locked him in.
All right, continue.
He wasn't he didn't snore.
I am willing
to
overlook all the flaws in this movie because I love it so much.
I want to know
yes.
I want to know what nurses didn't give this man a gown. Why is he completely naked on this table? What was happening when they left him? That's what I want to know.
The nurses,
there's a lot more Cillian Murphy than I expected.
Ensure the future by sexually assaulting him.
We went from scarecrow to scare show.
Maybe the nurses were like their own version of the military guys.
You know what? That's not too unbelievable. I mean, stuff like that has happened in hospitals before. So
absolutely.
It was in the middle of a bath. They just changed the IV bag for him. They were going to get him the thing, but then somebody said, "Hey, we need to evacuate the hospital. Some crazy shit's going outside." And it was in between shifts, so they didn't get to come back and check on him. I don't know. Whatever. That's a good way of explaining why he was naked. Or he just put in his instructions don't put any covers or gowns on me. I like to be free when I'm sleeping.
It's a DNC order. Do not clothe.
Do not clothe. But Jim, when he meets Selena, I forgot the other guy's name, but they're explaining to him what needs to be done. You need to move fast. You need to eat this. You need to do this. Don't go out at night unless it's absolutely necessary. Don't go out by yourself. Always travel in groups. So I mean, for a more modern audience or more recent audience, you would just think right towards the Zombieland rules, right? And it's nice that they're so quick to say, hey, this is how you act, what you should do. Don't call out to people. Don't do any of this. This is what's happening. This is how you stay alive. And then you see how when Selena's partner, friend, or when he gets bitten or scratched or whatever in Jim's house, she does not hesitate.
I love that.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so many zombie movies or infection movies or a post-apocalyptic dystopian movies where it's somebody that you've been with a couple of days, couple of hours, maybe, this is somebody you knew before. And they are like, oh my God, no, this can't be happening to you. Oh no, this is so bad. And then they get eaten by the zombie or whatever is going on in their world. she doesn't hesitate. She picks up the machete and he's like, wait. And then she just starts hacking. She just starts hacking, which at that moment I was like, that's exactly what you're supposed to do. And from Jim's perspective, you become selfish at the moment. Like, would you do that to me? Like, what if I'm going to do the same fucking thing to you in a heartbeat? And that line sticks out. And of course, they return to that line later. But that line of in a heartbeat, I would have done it. It lets you know how serious this situation is and how serious she is about survival, to the point where you're cheering for Selena from the first moment that you get a little bit more understanding of her character through the end of the film. You're like, she made it. She made it. I didn't care about anybody. I knew Hannah or her dad were going to die. Jim might die, but this person is definitely that one that stands out to me as like, they're not going to put up with any shit. Like,
she's such a strong character. I absolutely love her.
Oh yeah.
A lot of so there's, especially nowadays, there's a lot of strong female characters out there, but I think what a lot of movies get wrong is they don't give them any flaws. They don't give them any weaknesses. They don't let them fall in love. They don't, it's just a strong female character, which the world needs lots of. But they tend to be a little flat because they're too perfect.
Mm-hmm.
What I love about Selena is they show us her strengths. They show us how amazing she is. But they also show us how she has feelings, how she can grow to love and care, and how she does have some weaknesses. She was really well written.
Well, I look at the end when Jim seems like he could be attacking her, right? And there's a part of me that instantly goes, shouldn't she chop him up? Like, he's covered in blood. She doesn't know where it came from. Mm-hmm. And he looks like he could be attacking. But it is such a great character arc for her because everything she said she would do is negated by this feeling of hope. And he's the one that gave her hope, and he's the one that she kissed, and he's the one that made her feel life is possible again, right? Mm-hmm. And so the fact that she pauses and can't do it, even if it's a minuscule pause here, I know I'm nitpicking this, but I think this is so powerful. The fact that she doesn't do it is a billion times better than if she had. Because not just because, she shouldn't kill Jim, that would be weird, but just in the situation, it would make sense if she did, right? And I love how this solidifies how well-rounded she is. Because everything she thought she would do in the moment is gone.
There's also a scene in the tunnel when they're in the taxi and they have to stop and change the tire in the tunnel, and the infected start coming after them, where she doesn't get in the car first. She's like, get in the car. She makes Hannah get in the car first. She protects her tribe. She protects her people.
Absolutely.
And that was like the first moment I saw where she like put someone else first.
Can I just ask, is Hannah like on a pit crew somewhere?
Yeah, that's what I wrote down.
Because she changes this tire.
So my thoughts are, her dad's a taxi driver. She probably rides around with him, and she probably has been taught. That didn't seem all that unusual to me. That she
she's just fast. Like, I was like, damn, I could not do that. Like,
I couldn't either.
That's fantastic. I wish I could do that. I don't know what I
only thought. I was like, that is the fastest tire change I've seen outside of NASCAR.
I loved it. I thought it was such a cool thing to give her because that's such a stereotypical guy thing to do. Right. So, like, if Jim did it, like, that would feel normal Hollywood to me. And I loved that it wasn't even the strong Selena. It was Hannah. Like, you don't expect this. But also, they don't make a big deal out of it. But I thought it was a very interesting thing to concentrate on as much as they did. I feel like that really added a layer to Hannah's character.
Yeah, and at this point in the movie, everybody is useful except for Jim. Like, he's done nothing but been along for the ride. And so he's been kind of the damsel in distress through the whole damn movie.
I would like to know how this bicycling man became a like slaughtering Rambo machine towards the end of this. I was like, where did you get these skills at? Is that just from dealing with customers or what?
Look, I've heard some stories about bike messengers.
I don't know.
I've
I
seen
think
Teenage
it's just
Mutant Ninja
that
Turtles
rage
too.
within. I think it's that rage within that everybody, well, maybe not everybody, but a lot of people have.
Yeah,
I know
absolutely.
I have it. It's that inner rage. It's the mama bear rage. You know, you protect the ones you love, and you don't see it until you need to use it. So maybe Jim had it in him all along. Maybe that's like a, what's the word I'm looking for? Metaphor? Well, not a metaphor. It kind of parallels the rage virus in a way, where
No, I like
everybody's
that.
got it in them, and it can come out at any time. Like in The Walking Dead, we're all infected.
Yeah. No, you mentioned it earlier as well, and I thought that was such a cool thing because I hadn't thought of it that way at all. But like, they're not zombies; they're just super ragey humans, right? And the fact that Jim becomes that is such a interesting, I don't know, way to go about the ending. And they don't they don't spell it out for us, and it's just there, but it's using that rage in a good way versus, I don't know, an animalistic way or like what we do with war or any of that kind of stuff. And I'd completely missed this parallel until you mentioned it earlier, and now I absolutely love it so much.
Yeah, it's actually one of the reasons I love the movie so much too. When I first watched it, that's the first thing I thought was Jim's rage was basically paralleling the virus itself. And there's so much potential, like deadly potential in human rage. And people use it on all the wrong things. They use it on road rage and getting angry at a spouse and there's times when we need to be rageful. We need to stand up against certain entities, and it's just a matter of choosing when to do that wisely.
I like that.
Well, even as far as the explanation that is given in the film, there's not the long-winded, backstory. There's not this callback to it, but it starts of all things like an organization like Greenpeace or PETA. Not trying to say that they would do something like this, but they end up unleashing this virus from an animal testing facility because they think, oh, we're going in to save these animals, and the scientist is like, no, you don't understand. They're all infected. This is not, what you think it is. They're infected with rage, and they don't take him seriously. And they let the chimps loose, and one of them bites, one of the activists, right? And within seconds, this person's infected, then the next person, and you can see how it keeps going. And I like that they include this short preface to how we get to this point. And it doesn't rely on, one of the members of the survival crew is a scientist and says, oh yeah, there was this lab that this happened. Yeah, I like in a post-apocalyptic or zombie film or a pandemic film to where the people do not know what's going on, because in all honesty, you're not going to know what's going on in a situation like this, because when Jim is hanging out with Selena and the guy, I think Mark or whatever his name was.
Yeah, anyway. Mark, yeah.
Oh, okay. Got it right. When he's hanging out with them, they're explaining like, hey, there's no government, there's no police. And even when they get to Hannah and Frank's house, all they get is that one radio broadcast that's just a repeat that's coming from the army outside of Manchester. And there are no answers. None of them know what's going on. None of them know. They just know that society has fallen, and we need to do what we can to survive.
And they all try to do what they think is right. Right. Going back to that scene in the lab, so the scientists thought they were doing the right thing,
right,
by by infecting monkeys, or I guess we don't know if they were infecting the monkeys or if they were already infected. They weren't monkeys; they were apes. They were chimps. I shouldn't say monkeys. And the scientists thought they were doing right. The activists thought they were doing right. The military thought they were doing the right thing. Like, everybody thinks they're doing the right thing, and it's kind of scary because I mean those are really good villains. Always think they're doing the right thing, like Thanos.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanos is an excellent villain because he's well rounded. He believes he's helping the universe.
But even I just love that all that had to happen was for these activists to take 2 seconds and listen to this guy.
Yeah.
Like, this is the most realistic part of this entire thing for me, because this would absolutely happen. It would be, we're not listening to you, you're with them. And that's where the chaos would happen. And I love that it comes down to such a simple thing that could have been completely avoided if there was just communication and respect. And yet, both sides, like you guys said, think they're the good guy. The activists think that they're saving these animals, and the scientist is like, whoa, no, you don't understand. Like, here's what's happening. And even if they infected them, which I think they did, he thinks he's doing it for a good reason. He thinks that it's a very justified, we have to understand this in order to control it. And I think that is something that really plays out into everything that's happened in our own lives with the pandemic in the last year. Even people that I personally think are absolutely insane, I get why they feel the way they do. I don't agree with it at all, but I get where they're coming from, and I get how they justify these things. And that's honestly scarier to me, because it's not absolute insanity. I can see the logic there, and I think that's this whole film hits that. Like, whether it's Selena slaughtering her friend instantly with no questions asked, like, she can justify that. To an outsider, she looks nuts, but it makes perfect sense in the world she's living in. And I think this movie, if you just tapped into that thought, every single person is trying to do what they think is right. Whether it's sex slavery or anything else, every single person believes that they're doing the right thing.
That's terrifying.
Yeah, absolutely is terrifying.
Because your right thing could lead to the demise of someone else. Because when you're thinking about doing the right thing, a lot of times it's not calculated as far as like what can be the full effects of whatever action you take. It's a lot of it has to deal with the instant solution to the problem. So, it's like using any of those games, because there were a lot of things I thought about when I was watching this film, and one of them was the video game Until Dawn, I think it's called. But it's one of those games where it's a multi-path, like, thriller horror video game, and one decision you make affects so many other things throughout the game. And that's what life is like. I mean, you can't go back and undo your choice. But if I go and I say, well, Selena decides, okay, well, I am going to let him live. Okay, then, let Mark live. I'm not going to, chop him up right now. That's going to have a detrimental effect down the road. But if he isn't infected, she'll never know that, because she killed him, because she can't risk getting infected and die, because she wants to survive. I mean, that's one of the basic parts of human nature, is this need or this will to survive. And I can appreciate that, but even then, beyond that, I mean, they're because I think that her rationale for doing the right thing, or at least her doing the right thing execution, is a lot more benign than if we go all the way to that military squad that happens to be there, where it's kind of like, we're going to treat this like a game, and we're going to blow all these infected up, and then we're going to also, if any women show up here, we get to rape them. You get to see how they're now trying to excuse what their right thing or their good thing to do is, when someone who's rational, who hasn't been with these guys eating all these canned foods or old MREs and rations and whatever, you can look at it as, you guys need some help. You don't need to sit here in this place planning how to rape women, or raping women if they ever show up. But then also the commander's idea of, like, this is how I kept them in line. I promised them women. Like, just of all the things that are out there, like, I promised them women. So that's what's kept them in line. As opposed to,
what did he say? He said something like, "Oh yeah, what do 9 men do but wait to die?" That was his rationale.
I don't know, play cards or something.
I know.
I mean, yeah, there are so many things they could have done. And I hate the fact that which there's truth to it, but I hate the fact that that's what they rely on, of like, oh well, if we just get women here, everything will be fine. Yeah, for you, but, or at least you think it's going to be fine, but you're not considering exactly, how that's going to impact somebody else's life, somebody else's being, somebody else's health, mental and physical. But, it turns into, hey, let's just go ahead and do this. But even then, I think Selena makes a comment that resonates throughout the film. And it's just that plans are pointless.
Mm-hmm.
Whether the commander decides, oh, I'm going to, I promise women, we're going to go to this town, or I'm going to find this person. The plans are pointless because there's so many variables in this world that they have to deal with, to where she's right. I mean, you have to go by what you're presented with.
Yeah, and I still think about that scene where she kills Mark, and we see he's bleeding, but really don't know if is it a bite wound? Did he get glass in his arm? Like, I mean, he was rubbing.
It was a large gas on. Well, I was thinking, like, well, maybe it was glass. But,
yeah.
But even then, I mean, I'm sure the infected blood would have probably gotten onto him, just like it does with Hannah's dad.
Yeah.
Just through a drop of blood into his eyeball changes him.
So part of me wanted her to hesitate a little bit, just to see if he started doing that freaky, like, gagging sound and thrashing and vomiting blood, because they tend to do that before they turn.
Yeah, I feel like you could wait for that to make your choice.
Wait a second.
It would almost be better to me if Mark hadn't been actually infected. Like, if we saw, like, glass go into his arm, and then he's like, no, wait, and then she just slaughtered him. I think I would enjoy that. So. Yeah. Can I just talk for a minute about how much I hate Frank's death? I think Frank's death is such shit. Like, no, I love Frank.
But that's life, isn't it?
I think Frank is a great character. He's actually one of my favorite characters in it. I feel like this death is so terrible. Like, why would he walk over under a body and stand directly below it, looking up at it? And then this thing has to hit him perfectly in the eye for this to happen. Like, I feel like this is so forced, and maybe it's a cool visual for a half a second, but I feel like they could have done so much more with this. Like, how great would it have been? Yeah.
Oh, no, I was going to say, you're missing the obvious thing. I mean, this is obviously a premonition of his role as Mad Eye Moody.
Good God. You're not allowed to talk the rest of the episode.
I'm sorry. All right. And it was in the correct eye. Think about it.
Good. But no, like, to me, it would be so much more powerful if, like, as an audience, we saw that this body's above him, but he didn't. And then, like it fell on him, or it dripped on him, and, whatever. But it's really weird to me that he walks all the way over there for this to happen. I don't know. I don't dig it. But and then we don't even get a part where Selena runs over and attacks him. We get the soldiers instead, which is fine, I guess. But why didn't the soldiers fucking kill Jim when they had the chance? Why do they bring him along?
Maybe they need more men to
Yeah, I
help
was going
fight.
to say it comes down to more bodies as far as fighting along with them.
I guess.
Or maybe
Well, I
they're
mean,
watching them from afar to make sure. I don't know. Maybe they're watching them first, see who they are. My rationale behind Frank's death, and I like to make excuses for this movie, so you can just disregard everything I say. Frank has been holding his cool for so long. Yeah, I mean, he's putting Christmas lights up in his apartment to try to bring some kind of normalcy to his daughter's life. He's trying to be happy. He's serving creme de menthe for his guests. You know, he's trying to keep everything normal and happy, but nothing's normal and happy. And then they get to this place where everything's supposed to be okay, and it's not. The military's not there. They think they're not there. And he loses it. For the first time in the movie, he just loses his shit. And he has to step away for a minute. And I'm guessing because he doesn't want his daughter to see him losing his shit. And that's when he makes the stupidest mistake. He's like yelling at a bird that's on a body, like, get out of here. And that's the end of him. That moment where he gives in to his rage is the death of him.
So what we've learned from this movie is if humans are mean to animals in any way, bad things happen.
Yes. That is the real theme.
I can see that.
Spay and neuter your pets.
All right. There's this one part that I definitely love because it opens up a lot more questions about, conduct during an apocalypse or a crisis or natural disaster. And they find I think it was Budgies or whatever it was, but it was the little grocery store, the little shop that they found, and it was great because they're already traveling out of town. They see this place, they stop, and it immediately becomes I guess a moment where they can enjoy themselves. I wouldn't even say normalcy, but they get this moment where it's kind of like they're in the store. They've got all this stuff that they can, I was going to say purchase, but I mean, Frank does leave his card behind to pay for it, which I thought was a cool touch because money doesn't matter now. But he goes in, I'm sorry, they all go and they start getting all this stuff, water, sodas, protein bars, and of course, Frank finds the whole pallet of apples. And, the irradiated apples, which he's happy to find. But that moment where Selena and Hannah are going through the shelves, where the candy is, she's like, oh, I don't want to see chocolate ever again. Okay, maybe just this one. And it's that moment where, there's all this kind of stuff that might be accessible to you. It's going to last a long time on the shelves. And understanding that there's some other stuff that I want to get. There's some canned food, there's fruit, there's all this other stuff that I can get. I finally have a chance to actually access as opposed to, the convenience store food that was probably there and is not good for me to have, especially in a situation like this. But my question to you, I mean, because there is this kind of, it does kind of relate to Zombieland with Tallahassee's search for Twinkies and his disappointment in finding things like snowballs. But what is it that if you were on this quest, you would have to get? Like you would go in the store and say, like, I have to have this. I've got to have this.
Wow.
So the first thing that comes to mind is a lot of bourbon and wine. But realistically, I probably wouldn't be getting drunk much because that wouldn't be very smart. I don't know. I love Swiss cake rolls. Those little Debbie things. Little Debbie Swiss cake rolls.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I never get them because they're really bad for you. Freaking love them. They're the best.
Nice.
Maybe that would be the one.
I really don't know. I'm an absolute wimp, so I'm going to start with any pain pills I can find. Outside of that, I'm an absolute wimp, so maybe toilet paper. Um, toilet paper, wet wipes,
you're going
that kind
practical.
of stuff. And then, and as far as like a treat, though, most of the stuff that I would go to, like I know that there's this whole thing where for some reason the electricity's on in this supermarket, but I would think most of the things I would want would not be good anymore. You know, like I would want like meat and like I don't know, stuff that I'm probably not getting on a daily basis like that. So I don't really know. I don't know that I would go for like maybe soda, I guess. I'll say soda. That's a long way to get there. I'm sorry.
I'm going to do all your answers on that one, James.
Your answers are
I was
too
waiting for you to say something like Red Bull.
No, the Red Bull makes me
Kickstart?
crash after a while, so that seems like it'd be bad. Like, you know, I'd be good for a bit, and then I'd crash, and you know.
That's what I'm thinking with booze. I do love a good bourbon, and I like a good red wine, but I don't see myself drinking much in the apocalypse because I'd be too worried. You have to always be aware.
If you find the right place, I think it would be okay. You know, for you to
Some
pull
addicts.
it off.
Can you imagine if I did it, Don? It's been 10 years since I've had alcohol. So, like, I'd take like one shot, and I would just be like in the corner, like, I'll tell you another thing about these fucking zombies. You know, so everyone would be like, shh,
and then they burst, you know?
and then I'd get killed. So yeah, now I can't think of anything else though. Like I keep racking my brain. Like maybe cookies, like cookies and crackers would hold up, and yeah, so maybe that'd be the other thing I would grab.
Oh yeah, that's what I should have said. Chips. I love potato chips.
Oh yeah, chips. That's a great
I'm
one.
a sucker for some potato chips.
Can you imagine dying because you got Fritos and you're over here crunching in the corner? Damn it. Pop your Pringles and out they come to get you.
Once you pop the top, they can't stop.
I was just going to say that.
And then there's a zombie over there eating somebody who has Lay's and say, I could never stop at just one.
Somehow we started writing a comedy parody over here.
I do like that I refer to this movie as a zombie movie, but they're they're not zombies. But it's got all the tropes of a zombie movie.
Mm-hmm.
It's got that loss of identity theme, that it's got the horde of mindless killers after you. It's got the shopping scene, which is, I think, perfect in any zombie flick. And so even though they're not zombies, I do always refer to it as a zombie film.
Well, and that makes perfect sense. I mean, you look at what Romero did, and he wasn't trying to do zombies, but that's what we call them now. You know, nobody's like, oh, his ghouls.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, we said it on our episode, but we don't say it in normal conversation. If I'm talking about any of his films, I say zombies because that's what it is. And this pulls so much from Romero's work and from all the zombie films, but it does it in a way that makes the zombie apocalypse very realistic. Yes. All it does is amplify something that's already inside of us. Mm-hmm. That's scary as shit. If you go to decomposing and you go to literally raising from the dead, like that doesn't work for me because like, oh, okay, a bunch of zombies came alive in their caskets and they're still stuck underground. Who the fuck cares? That could be happening right now. And we just wouldn't know. But, you know, so I like how this makes it very realistic and taps into something while using all these tropes that we're used to and feeding us a very good zombie story in the process.
It's one of my favorites. When the first time I watched it, that one of the things I said after the movie was like, this is the way it's going to happen. Like, it's not going to be people rising from the dead. It's going to be a virus. It's going to be something horrible like rabies, but 1,000 times worse. If it were, I'm not saying it will happen. I'm just saying if the zombie apocalypse would happen, that's how it would happen. Like Paul Tremblay's zombie apocalypse. Did you see or read Survivor Songs?
Yes.
Yeah.
I like basically everything Paul makes.
Me too. I had a dream about him.
Nice.
The other day. I did. Paul Tremblay. It was really weird. He was my neighbor all of a sudden. and I kept I can't remember the whole dream, but I remember how I felt in the dream. I felt embarrassed and fumbling and dropping things. And then at one point I backed my car out of the driveway and it rolled down to the ditch and I wrecked the car. My mom and him were having hors d'oeuvres at the counter at her house and talking about me. And I just felt really embarrassed. Is this
That's fantastic.
Somehow this symbolizes the way I feel as a writer.
Oh, that's great. I always find stuff like that in dreams interesting because it's always it's that fact of how things are normal that absolutely shouldn't be. He's suddenly your neighbor, but in the dream that just makes perfect sense, you know? Mine are usually way weirder, but that's it's lots of people have 4 legs. It's perfect. But
dreams in movies are never weird like that. Like the dream in this movie, where he just had a dream where he woke up and everybody left him. Jim woke up in the movie, or he was in his dream in the movie. Everybody was gone, and he was screaming again, "Hello!"
That's all he ever does. He would never make it through a slasher.
Nobody was there, and the sheep were fleeing like rats, kind of like the rats in the tunnel. But
if he was in a slasher, he'd be the first one dead because he would just open a door and be like, "Hello." So, no more Jim. He was naked. He had to die. So.
Poor Jim.
Exactly.
He goes through in the end, and
I'm still really bothered that they wrote "hello" when help is less letters and would have taken less time. They cut it so close.
How else is he going to dream about hell?
That's true.
Fine,
which again, it would have just made sense if you had hell written in his dream and then he dreams again. I'm sorry, and then in real life it says help. That would have made more sense. But I get it. You have to have that. You have to have that callback to him saying hello all the time and getting into danger because of hello, as opposed to now he says, or excuse me, they lay out hello and it's, I guess, possibly resulting in them being saved.
Yeah, I think it was very intentional. He's so desperate for people, for family, throughout the whole movie. He's constantly calling hello. And then at the end, he says hello one more time, and it works.
And then he has inspired a song by Adele. I mean, so that's great.
I read another an article about the theme of Jim trying to find comfort in a father figure throughout the whole movie, and I didn't see it before, but when I rewatched, I was like, oh yeah, he kind of does, because in the very beginning he goes to the church. He's trying to seek solace there with the father, and the father's a zombie. And then he meets Frank, who becomes kind of like a father figure to him. He even calls him Dad when he wakes up from his dream.
Yeah.
And they have that moment in the store where Frank is teaching him how to pick out a good scotch, which is a very good father-son moment. And then Frank dies, and then he's got the West, Eccleston. He has a moment with him, and Eccleston rubs him on the head, kind of like a father would. And so he's constantly seeking people. He's seeking someone to call family, someone to call his people. And so at the end, kind of gets his people.
I'm kind of blown away by the Eccleston part. The others made perfect sense to me. And then that one, I was like, whoa, that does make sense. And it's neat how it's instantly shattered for him, Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's supposed to be this nice, hopeful, they found a safe place, and then, nope.
Yeah.
I do think it's really weird that they go to his parents' house and that his parents left him a note at their house. Shouldn't the parents have left this note in the hospital?
Yeah.
Like, they knew where he was. And but no, they're like, why don't you go ahead and risk this apocalypse to come to our house and find us dead and read this note? When they could have left the note there so he wouldn't make this trip.
Yeah.
It's kind of strange. So maybe shitty dads have been an ongoing thing in his life. I'm not sure.
I was wondering that too, because the picture they had was a picture of him as a kid.
Yeah, it's not updated at all. They can print out a Facebook picture.
You have a new one? You have his graduation or something?
It's the only one they
James
have.
Bringing up Facebook, and I'm like, I don't remember MySpace being out in 2001, 2002.
That's why I said it.
Maybe there was too much outside. Maybe they couldn't risk their own lives going to the hospital.
I suppose, but if you're going to kill yourself anyway, like,
I thought that was pretty dismal to be like, don't wake up. That was their note. What if he reads it? He woke up.
It's like, all right, cool. You left some pills out for me. Let me go take them.
They were horrible people.
Dear Jim, hope you died. Love, Dad.
Oh my goodness.
That's messed up. Like, why even leave the note if you hope he died? It's kind of weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, the note bothers me. Like, I think the overall sentiment of going there is really cool, and it's a very natural thing. The note just makes it all really weird to me, so I had to pick on it.
There's something that we talked about, but really didn't get to. I mean, I guess we talked around, but didn't get to talk about that much. And that is the introduction of Private Mailer and the Major West's, the doctor. I don't know which number doctor he is, James, but you would know better than me. Gives us, okay, Doctor 9, or the Ninth Doctor.
Dr. 9.
Dr. 9. I think that was a Nazi scientist, Dr. 9. Anyway.
Don started watching with the 13th Doctor. So anyway, yes. Continue.
That's the best doctor I've seen. So he introduces us to Private Mailer, and you see that he's one of these infected people. And I think it's a smart strategy on his part as a leader, not necessarily a military leader, but as a leader, because he has Private Mailer chained up in the garden or in this courtyard area of the home that they're all staying in, and he's got him chained up because he wants to see how long it takes for the infected to starve to death, which is actually a really cool concept. And I don't recall too many other movies, trying to evaluate how long it would take for a zombie to die off or to lose energy or just, further decompose to where they're nothing. But it's really cool that they added this feature because that's another way he can look at hope. So if Mailer was with us and it's been X amount of days and now Mailer is dead, that means it might be safe for us to leave, or it might be safe for, this place to be repopulated. And I thought that was a really cool way for him because it doesn't seem like he's interested in raping women, as he's kind of proposed to his soldiers. He's not interested in. He's interested in getting out of this situation. But he sees that at least promising them women and the use of these women's bodies is okay because it'll be a means to an end. It's a way to put off the inevitable as far as like these guys mutinying or killing him or whatever. But as they have this moment where Hannah and Selena have been prepared as far as like fully dressed in the lady of the house's gowns and things like that. Selena does this thing where she's got all these medications, all these pills because she was a chemist, and she hands Hannah all these Valiums. And early in the film, her dad doesn't want her to take any of those pills, and then finally concedes and says, "Oh, you can have half of one, to calm down or to dull your senses, to chill out a little bit, right?" But at this moment, there is no discussion, there is no demand. Selena hands her pills, and Hannah thinks it's for pain, or it's it could be something else. And she simply says, "No, these pills are to make it so you won't care what happens to you." And they got into this moment, at least Selena's gotten into this moment where she's accepted that this is what's going to happen. And those pills almost become like a superpower for Hannah. I mean, that's the only way I can describe it, because those pills make her not care so much to where she is saying what's on her mind. She's open, and then she's almost seeing what's going to happen before it does. Or she's predicting things and foreshadowing things. Like, oh, yeah, you're not going to do anything to me. You're going to die. You're going to die pretty soon. And this would normally be a comedic moment, but, you know, in the back of your head, you're like, oh, my God, they're going to hurt this girl. They're going to do something to her. And then all of a sudden, Mailer comes back because Jim has shot his chains loose, or shot his chains and broken him loose. And Mailer is going through and attacking and getting at all these guys that had chained him up as part of this experiment. And he just goes, no pun intended, he goes wild through that house in a full fit of rage throughout the house, bites people, infects them, and we're able to have Jim, Selena, and Hannah escape, which is great. You know, they escape not necessarily unscathed, but even as Jim comes back into the house or into the room with Hannah and Selena, he's covered in blood, and we talked about this earlier. But when Selena doesn't attack him, they kiss, and then Hannah attacks him, hits him over the back, and says, "Oh, I thought he was biting you." And it's I would have loved to have seen that in the movie theater, because all the tension that was being driven up where Selena might kill him, might chop him up like she did with Mark, that's gone. They start kissing. Then Hannah attacks him. And just to see that complete shift of reactions from fear, anxiety to relief, and then to the comic relief of Hannah attacking him with, what was it, a vase or a lamp or something? I can't remember what it was, but it was just one of those things where you're kind of like, why would you do? I thought you were biting her. And she's just so monotone and calm when she says it. I mean, drugged up, but you know.
I love that. I love the way that whole thing played out. Going back to Selena's character arc and just how well-rounded of a character she is. She's very strong, but she's in this situation where, even though she's a very strong person and can take care of herself, she is up against a whole bunch of trained military men with guns. She knows it's going to happen. She knows she can't fight her way out of this. Mm-hmm. She doesn't have her weapon. She doesn't have the strength to fight these guys off. And so she does what she always does. She kind of makes it so that she doesn't care. Which I think has been her role through the whole movie. Like, her survival method has just been not caring. That's why she can just kill Mark in the blink of an eye, because she's trained herself to not care. And so she knows Hannah doesn't have that skill set yet as a young girl. So she offers her the drugs so that she doesn't have to care. So part of me wonders if there is a backstory for Selena. What has she experienced in life prior to the apocalypse? Prior to
Actually,
what went down?
I don't know pre-apocalypse, but I know a piece of her backstory that didn't make the film.
Oh.
There was a part that was supposed to be in it where Selena had to kill her own parents once they were infected. Oh. And that's why she's able to just slaughter anybody. That's why she's able to disconnect and do it, because she's done the hardest thing already.
Yeah.
And I look at Anna and the Apocalypse, one of my favorite zombie films. And there's a character who had to kill his father. And because of it, he's the zombie warrior. He's out there whipping ass while no one else is doing it, and they're hiding. And that's why, because he did the hardest one already. Mm-hmm. And this is how he deals with it. And I wish that would have made the film instead of Jim's parents, because it drives her story so hard, and it adds this whole subtext of why she takes care of Hannah, because she doesn't have parents and she knows how the fuck that feels. and she had to put them down.
Right.
And now this child, who obviously already lost her mother somehow, her dad goes down, and she takes over that parental role for her and just wants to protect her. Even when she can't stop anything, she wants to give her the drugs, like you guys said. She's there making sure that she gets in the car. She's there taking care of her at the end, whether Jim lives or dies, no matter which ending you watch. Selena is there to take care of Hannah. And I feel like this scene is so much more powerful, and I wish that it had made the cut.
Wow, I wish it did too. I had no idea. It's really Selena's movie.
It definitely is. It definitely. I think Jim's family, that would have worked if it had been them just dead in the bed, holding a picture of him. The note the writing on the back of the picture kills it. But if you had that and then coupled with, Selena then tells him like, oh, it's probably for the best. You don't want to, I had to kill my, and then she talks about what she had to do.
Yeah.
And that would have been a great way to build up a little bit more backstory, not build up more backstory, but give us a little bit more characterization of her and what she's had to deal with, while Jim has been in a coma.
Well, and imagine if she didn't even tell him, but you just got flashes of her having to do it. Like she's in this house and she's looking at family photos of him and his family, and she sees the dead parents there. But then, like, we're getting these flashes of her own life and her parents turning and how she had to put them down. And like, God, that would be so powerful. That would just be amazing.
A line like, "Oh, consider yourself lucky. This was an easy way for them to go out." Or yeah. I mean, that would have hit even harder.
Oh yeah.
I think she said that at one point, didn't she? Consider yourself lucky or something.
Yeah.
Oh, when did she say that?
I don't know. I don't remember that, but that's amazing.
When he first met her and Mark, and they got into that little convenience store shop, and they were holed in. I thought, maybe not. Maybe
yeah, it was early. No, it was early on. As far as like he was talking about his family and said, and she was basically saying they're probably dead. I can't remember the whole conversation, but she was basically saying like it'd be dumb to go. They're probably dead. Like everybody's dead,
and she was right
or infected.
Oh wait, no, it was at their house when they found them dead. She was like, "Oh,
okay,
they're lucky because they died peacefully." Maybe that's what it was.
Well, I mean, she is the chemist, so she would have known.
Yeah.
I have one more question for you guys, and this doesn't really fit here because I'm going to go back to Eccleston for a second. Mm-hmm. Do you think he was surprised when women actually showed up? Like, he cuts this deal to maintain power, to have security, to have people around him making sure that he's safe, and he promises them something that there's not necessarily a way to deliver on. And yet, he can show, hey, I've been trying to get you women, they're just not coming, right? When they really find women, like, I'm not saying he's upset they're there or anything, but do you think this guy was like, well, shit? Because this actually really complicates things. And I can't think that this was a good idea. This wasn't a good plan, So what do you guys think of that? Do you think he was surprised?
What were they going to do? I mean, what were they going to do? They're going to share them? Were they going to, like, even consider being respectful and try to woo them? What were they going to do? And then if she chose one of them to be her partner for whatever reason, then what? Would there be jealousy? Would guys be fighting over them? It just caused a problem, it seems.
Well, and, like, even if, like, God forbid, and most likely scenario, all 9 rape with them, and they become pregnant. How do you know that's, it's not like there were a great diversity in this group, and there's not like, I find the whole thing very odd, and it just feels more like a rushed promise than it does something he thought would actually play out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, just something I was thinking about. All right. I don't have anything left in my notes. Do either of you, besides getting to movie recommendations?
No, I have like 5 pages of notes, and I think we've touched on everything.
Awesome. Don, do you got anything before we jump that way?
No, I've got the movie recommendations. I think that's a great place to end it and transition into the Rex.
All right, cool. Well then, Red, since you're the guest, we will let you go first. If people liked this film, what do you suggest they watch as well?
Oh, I suggest they watch the zombie movie that I watched immediately after this movie, which was Dawn of the Dead, the remake.
Nice.
Those sprinting zombies, they were a shock. They were terrifying the first time I saw them. I know they're not as much of a shock anymore, especially after like World War Z, which is another really fun one. But if you got to watch it when it first came out, it was a really good one. And the other zombie movie I really like, it's one of my all-time favorites, is Train to Busan.
Oh yeah. Train's always one of my top ones.
Yes.
All right, Don, what do you got?
All right. Let's see. I got like 500 films right here. I'm going to go ahead and start off at the bottom of the list. And this does not mean as far as like importance or quality.
If you sat there and ranked them all, that would be fascinating to me.
or even puns. So I would say as above, so below. As far as this whole idea of survival and when you're not planning on it. Cloverfield Lane, I think it was like 10 Cloverfield Lane or 18, whichever one has John Goodman in it. It Comes at Night, The Crazies, James's favorite movie, The Happening.
I like The Happening.
I Am Legend is always a good one. Yes. I mentioned Platoon as far as that survival mentality that comes with the military personnel and how there becomes this us versus the other. Peninsula, the sequel spinoff to Train to Busan. Contagion because of the viruses.
I'm going to start with The Walking Dead season 1. It has a lot in common with this, but it's interesting to me how we tell it from an American point of view versus a British point of view. The little tiny subtleties and differences, and just like I don't know, there's just something very different about it while being very similar. So I think it's interesting to check out both. Obviously, I'm going to say Anna and the Apocalypse because I love it. Train to Busan is always fucking amazing, so we're going to just keep saying Train to Busan here. Zombieland and Anna go back and forth as my favorite ever. Return of the Living Dead, just anything like that. Return, we did an episode on it, and Jeff Strand was the guest, and he talked about how much it influenced zombie lore. And I look at that, I look at this, and how it, as you said earlier, reanimated zombie films for us. Just these things are so ingrained in us as the rules of zombies now. And I think it's important to look at the films that did that. Outside of that, I mean, just anything at all that covers like being completely alone. So you could go Twilight Zone a couple episodes. You could, just these things that really explore what it means to lose your entire community. And there's just way too many to even name, but I know they're popping into listeners' heads. Oh, I saw this. Yeah, go watch it again. Like, we're living in a world where we're literally, not completely, but we're way more fucking isolated than we were. And I don't know that I want to encourage everybody to feed into that feeling, but I also think it's important when you watch these films to realize that unlike them, everyone else isn't gone. You have people you can reach out to, you have people you can connect with, and it's not the fucking same. I don't know that it's ever going to be the fucking same, but I hope that we get to something that normalizes at some point. But I feel like a lot of these movies can really just show us, hey, that's how I feel, but the reality is this. Is that, I hope that's making sense. So while that's not a direct recommendation, I hope whatever popped into your head you go watch. So there you go. All right. So after that long, rambling, incoherent response, Red, let's kick it back to you. Where can our listeners find you on social media, and when is this book dropping, and how do they pre-order, or whatever else you want to tell us?
You can find me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and it's all Red Lagoe. Just plain at Red Lagoe.
Perfect.
My book, Dismal Dreams, review copies just went out yesterday. And I've got paperback review copies going out next week. And it publishes on June 25th.
Oh, nice. Very cool.
And I actually have a zombie book out. It's called Fair Haven. It's a rabies-like zombie.
Interesting.
That I published in 2017.
Well, very cool. We've greatly enjoyed having you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
So that wraps it up for another week. As always, I am James Sabata.
And I'm still waiting for Sandra Bullock to show up.
And we will see you next week here at thenecronoma.com.